Running the floor, Embiid stuffs it. Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Pick Swap Media. I'm here doing some more draft coverage today with a special guest. I'm sure you know him from his draft YouTube videos and everything else he does. I've got special guest Romp with me. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk about the draft and Sixers related stuff. Well, Sixers, it's tough to talk about. You know, we're in a depressing state, but I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. The draft is coming closer and closer, right around the corner now. So I guess to get right into it, who would you rank kind of your top 5 prospects as the draft's getting closer? Top 3, but what would you put as your final 5?
I would say number 1. Probably it's either Jabari Smith or Banchero for me, but it's interchangeable to be honest. But just off a gut feeling, I would put Banchero number 1, and then number 2 Jabari Smith, and then number 3 Chet Holmgren, obviously, and then I think Jaden Ivey number 4. And I kind of have like a surprising one who I really believe in, just as like a defensive player of the year like potential. I think Jeremy Sochan from Baylor. I think if he goes to the right team and they develop his offensive game, oh my God, he could be a game changer for one of the teams in the lottery, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of his as well. We'll jump in a little bit, talk about each of those guys a little. Jabari Smith, who we brought up, I kind of agree with you in the sense that I'm not as kind of sold as him being the surefire number 1 pick in the way that it's been kind of projected throughout this whole thing. And there's obviously a ton of talent there, 6'10" frame, everything, shot creation. I have some concerns about kind of the shot creation at the NBA level, and in terms of he's a guy who's more of like a 2 dribbles, get to his spot and get up a shot. And that's kind of like, he's not really a take a guy off a dribble and create that way. Mm-hmm. And like, of course he's 6'10", so a lot of it is going to translate, but so much of his like production just relies on just purely like shooting over guys and stuff like that, which is just not going to be as easy at the NBA level. Do you think there's going to be a little bit of like a learning curve for Jabari, and do you have kind of similar concerns, or what's your feeling on him?
Yeah, you put that perfectly. I think that's why I have Banchero over him, because Banchero has the upside of like running the offense, because he has a nice handle for his size. While Jabari Smith, he kind of needs some screens. Yeah, he needs players to play make for him in order to get like an advantage. And he does rely on like making tough shots, which is wonderful. But at the same time, I would like to see a little more creation. But at the end of the day, he's 6'10", and that shooting stroke is very pure. So I'm sure he's going to work on some explosive things in the NBA with NBA coaching staffs and trainer and stuff like that. So I still think he's going to be a hell of a player, but in terms of the number 1 player for me, it's got to be Banchero, because he has that upside to be like a Jason Tatum type. Not saying he's going to be that, but he can, run the show, run the offense, play make, and just having a guy like that is probably one of the most valuable archetypes in the league, in my opinion. That's why the Celtics are so good with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. They could both handle the rock. Now, Jaylen Brown needs to work on his handle, but we can talk about that another day. But yeah, that's why I have Banchero just above Jabari Smith, but he's still going to be a hell of a player.
Yeah, I happen to agree with just about everything you said there. And I don't think Jabari Smith's kind of like a major bust candidate by anything. I think his floor is still pretty high, but I do think he settles for too many tough twos. He's a big fan of the mid-range, which has become a lost art in the NBA, but I get hesitant about guys who are overly relying on it. And like you said about Banchero, I think it's pretty clear that like he's the guy that you can do the most with out of any prospect in this draft. Like you said, with the playmaking potential, 3.2 assists per game, but like the passes he made, honestly, were more encouraging than the numbers indicate. And a guy that can just like purely get a bucket. Like when we talk about being like an NBA ready body, he's by far the most advanced out of the 3. Like he's a nice 30 pounds heavier than Jabari, at 55 pounds bigger than Chet. And just like he has that, he's enough of a freak that I believe that's going to translate more. And at the end of the day, the game is about getting a bucket. He has that ability. He's got a little shake to him. I believe more in his handle and his ability to get to the basket for that translating. You'd like the shot to come along a little more, but I have confidence that it will. The way he shoots in the mid-range is super effective. I think the 3-point's going to follow, and I really do think that this is kind of the most like surefire high floor pick of this draft.
Yeah, I also think he's going to be able to get that 3-point shot whenever he wants, because if defenders play up on him, he's probably just going to go right around them, with his ability. So I think he's going to have that shot. I think players are going to play off of him. Plus he's 6'10", so he could shoot over anyone. It's just about, developing, getting more confident. And when he gets downhill, his like scoring style reminds me so much of Jimmy Butler. Like just the way he looks to score, because like we said, the 3-point shot's not really there yet. And Jimmy's not a 3-point guy, but he loves the mid range and he loves like stopping, pivoting. He has so many counters. Like when he stops in the paint, he's pump faking, stuff like that. And it reminds me of Jimmy Butler. But the thing is, he's got the size. And plus, you also said he's already got an NBA-ready body. And that gives him such an advantage because he doesn't have to adjust his body and then adjust his play to, adding muscle, stuff like that. He's just got to come in, fine-tune some things, work on his handle, work on everything, obviously, get a little quicker on defense, and he's going to be a star, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. There's a little bit of defensive concerns. His pick and roll reads on the defensive end weren't particularly great, but I do think the upside is there. And we see this in college a lot with guys just kind of not being fully locked in on every possession. But the potential has been there. In isolation, opponents were 7 for 32 on him, just 21.9%. And the pick and roll ball handlers were 3 for 23 from the field on the attempts this season. So obviously a small sample size. You got to take that with a grain of salt. But I do believe he has like the frame and the ability that once he fully commits in that area, it will be just fine. A more kind of controversial draft piece has been Chet Holmgren. And obviously we've known a lot about this guy for quite some time, been a guy that's been hyped up as a prospect. What is your thoughts on Chet and the way he will translate to the NBA?
I mean, I think he has potential as like a generational defender, rim protector. Offensively, he could be insane, but there's also concern about his body, obviously, with how skinny he is. Also, I don't think in the NBA he's going to be able to like create off the dribble. And he doesn't really have like a fadeaway game. I would like to see him like establish a little fadeaway stuff because he can get that whenever he wants. But he kind of just like shoots spot up threes and stuff like that. But I mean, he could handle every now and again, gets the rebound. Sometimes he brings it up the court. He's just a high risk, high reward type of pick where he could potentially be, something crazy that we'd never seen. But at the same time, he could just be a defensive, rim protector and then turn into like a Lauri Markkanen or Porzingis offensively. So you just don't know.
Yeah, I would say I'm a little bit higher on Chet than I think most people, and from what it sounds like that you are as well. Kind of what you touched on there, like I think the worst case scenario for Chet is super overstated. Like the worst case scenario of him being a high impact rim protector and a guy that can shoot threes like Lauri Markkanen or Kristaps Porzingis, that's not that bad on what you're looking for. Like I think like the perception that he could be like this disaster pick is not really correct. Like I think at the minimum, he's still a very serviceable NBA player. He for sure has way more of a range than any of these guys when we talk about the top picks and what he can be. But there's so much appeal to me in terms of the pick and pop game, the stuff that he can do. And I do believe in the creation in the long term. I mean, he's still 20 years old, still has a ton of development to go. I think the fadeaway, the post, all that kind of stuff will come. And when you talk about like, the positional situation he's going to be put in is going to be very strange. Like, I don't think he can operate as like a true center because of just his body's so weird. And I don't really have faith that he's ever going to put on enough weight to be a true NBA big man. But when you talk about like, can he guard like Joel Embiid? No, but nobody really can straight up. So don't really worry about it. I think he's terrific as kind of a roamer defensively. You put him in, he's got great defensive instincts too. So I do believe in Chet in the long term. And I think he's a guy that in this top of the draft class, when looking at like the teams, you get him in the right situation when he has time to just develop. He's not really rushed. Like the sky's the limit for what he can do.
Yeah, that's true. I just have Banchero over him. Jabari Smith and him are very, very close for me. But like you said, he could be a roamer. He could be like we see Robert Williams doing that job in the finals, doing a terrific job, and he's like 50%. So he could be that type of player. And I think the plan would be developing him at the 4. You don't want him developing as your true center. Obviously, there's going to be lineups where he has to play center because that's where the NBA is going. But imagine you get a 7-footer with that wingspan at the 4. Whew. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at my top 5, I have it ranked. I have Chet as my number 1. I have Paolo as my number 2, and have Jabari as my number 3. When we swing in beyond that, Jaden Ivey is the first guard that is kind of on the board in this draft. A guy that took a massive leap from his freshman to sophomore year with the shooting specifically, increasing that about 10%, which pretty much drastically changed his NBA ceiling. What are your thoughts on Ivey overall?
The dude's just explosive. And his body, he seems to have an NBA body pretty much already. And he's just in transition. He's so fun to watch. His shot obviously improved a lot. If he can continue that in the NBA, I mean, that would turn him into an unreal talent. But that's a question mark if he could bring that to the NBA. I think he will, maybe not right away, but I mean, he's just going to be a great scorer, great playmaker. I think he's kind of getting slept on, to be quite honest with you, because there's a world where, say he really reaches his ceiling, he could potentially be the best offensive player in this draft class. That's how talented he is.
Yeah, I don't think the perception has seemingly been like it's the top 3 and then a big drop off. And I don't think that's fair to Ivey at all. I think he's very much in the conversation with those top 3. And like, honestly, there's a real argument for him to be taken above some of these guys in the situation that the teams are in. Like the Rockets providing him with a backcourt, him and Jalen Green would be unreal, both from like a highlight perspective, athleticism, and just looking at like the long term of that. So I do think there's a great appeal with him. He gets compared to Ja Morant a little too much in my opinion. I think there's like even a little bit of like an Anthony Edwards to his game, or Donovan Mitchell, in the way he's very attack minded, so I think like putting him in more of a shooting guard role is ideally to optimize him, and having a true point guard alongside him. He shows a ton of potential shooting off screens, catch and shoot too. He scored 1.1 points per possession in transition, 1.04 points per possession off catch and shoot, and 1.18 points per possession off screens. So all pretty good indicators there. The transition is going to be kind of the game-changing part of his game. It's just unreal what he does in kind of the open court, and he's a guy that's not afraid to just dunk it on somebody's head. So definitely a super intriguing prospect there. Do you think there's any chance he climbs into the top 3?
I mean, potentially. I don't know. I think the top 3 are pretty much set from what I've researched, but who knows? Yeah. But I want him to fall to Detroit. I think him and Cade would be such a fun backcourt to watch.
Yeah, that would be
awesome. I don't know what Sacramento is gonna do, because I mean, I would pick Ivy, but they have De'Aaron Fox, so they're probably going to trade. I would trade back if I was them, and then like draft Shaedon Sharpe or something. I don't know. Because they just traded Tyrese Halliburton, so it's like you're going to trade him and then draft another guard. It's just weird.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of weirdness going on in Sacramento for several years now, so I don't have a whole lot of confidence of whatever they end up with that pick will be the right selection. To jump to another guy you talked about open on, Jeremy Sochan out of Baylor, I think is a guy that I agree is very underrated. I had him as the number 7 prospect on my list. I have Keegan Murray, Jaden Ivey, and Bennedict Mathurin above him. But I do agree that this guy has legit like game-changing potential. And I think the phrase like a 1 through 5 defender is thrown around way too much, but he's a guy that it like truly applies to, and that he can guard every position on the court and make a positive impact. What are your full thoughts on him beyond that?
He just seems like a dog. Everyone loves to say that, but he truly does, and he reminds me of Marcus Smart. I think he's going to be like a culture changer, and it really just depends if his offensive game can come around, because if he can do that, I mean, he has passing ability. He seems to have a great feel on that end. It's just about like, putting it all together and working on that 3-point shot, trying to get up to like 36% or something like that. But his defense is incredible. 6'9", long, really can guard any position, and also brings like a contagious energy when he's really on his game, which is necessary it would help the Sixers if we could somehow get him.
Yeah, definitely. He's an interesting story too because so going to Baylor, him and Kendall Brown were both recruited out of the same high school class. Kendall Brown was ranked the number 10 prospect coming out of high school, and Sochan was the number 90 prospect. So not like looked at as kind of the projected high impact guy out of the two, but really he outplayed Kendall Brown in a major way. And Kendall Brown's also in this draft projected to go closer in kind of the 20s range, a guy somewhere around the Sixers range, but obviously he's pretty early in his development. I'm very impressed with Sochan overall. And I mean, looking at the isolation, opponents were 6 for 22 on him. The pick and roll defense is terrific. He can drop, he can blitz, he can do just about everything you ask for there. He's a guy like the swing factor is what he can do offensively. But I think even if he can do the bare minimum, like he's still a very functional NBA player and a guy that will bring a positive impact. To transition to another guy, this is a guy I'm particularly high on, is Bennedict Mathurin. I have him as my number 4 prospect. I even have him ahead of Jaden Ivey on here. He's just a guy that I see no like pure holes in his game. There's the defensive concerns, but I think just plug and play at the NBA level, he's a guy that I think there's more, and I think he has a little bit of that like it factor that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, his game, his offensive game, like when he gets so much elevation on his 3-point shot, and
yeah,
that allows him to shoot it like if he's heavily contested, and his offensive game is, I mean, he's potentially a 3-level scorer. I was watching his highlights earlier today, and I got vibes of Swaggy P. Like you said, he has that it factor. Now, I mean, Swaggy P in his prime is underrated as a scorer, but he's probably going to be better than that. But offensively, it's just he's one of the better 3-point shooters in the class, probably one of the best. I would say he's probably the best. But this dude is for real. Yeah, I agree. I would love to hear your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I think he's kind of cut from like the Devin Booker, Bradley Beal mold, and I get that's high praise, and he might not eclipse that quite level. But in the way that these guys are able to just shot create and come off screens and just be that like key part of an offense, I think he's capable of that. I think he's like a 15+ point per game scorer in his career, and like he's a guy not afraid to step into the spotlight. He will hit some big shots. He will talk his shit. He will do his thing, and I absolutely love that. I had a blast watching this Arizona team this year. Christian Coloco and Dalen are both guys I really like too. So all 3 of them were guys that I think I have higher than most people. But for Mathurin specifically, I mean, he's a guy that like there's certain guys I believe like their game translates better at the NBA level than it does in college. And I think he could be one of these guys that he can unlock himself further when there's more kind of isolation opportunity, more shot creation, more just time for him to be him. And I'm excited to see it. So I personally have Mathurin super high on my board, and I think whatever team he ends up with is going to be super happy with his production. To switch gears a little bit, let's jump towards the Sixers end of things. So we'll start off with, if you're on the clock as the Sixers right now, who is your number 1 guy?
My number 1 guy, if I'm the Sixers, is Wendell Moore Jr. Okay. And the reason being is I think he's a plug-and-play guy. You can put him anywhere, and I think he'll produce. And I love his defense. I think he can be a guy where he just hounds the best player, the best ball handler, and annoys them while staying in front of them, unlike Matisse. But he's 6'5". His shooting, I think, will come around, and eventually he'll be like a very good 3-point shooter. Also, there's some, signs that he could run the pick and roll. He just has a great feel for the game. And I think looking at our past, I just want a player that is guaranteed to be an NBA player. Like I don't trust our development at all. And that is the reason I would go with Wendell Moore, because it just seems like at the worst, he's going to be a very quality role player at the wing position. And that's one of our biggest weaknesses as of last year.
Yeah, definitely. I do think people are scarred from looking at the draft, scarred by kind of the slow development. Like Jaden Springer, who I would like to say I have a ton of faith in long term. I still think he projects very well. There's few players that are in like such an early stage of development as Jaden Springer. And looking at like this range of guys in the Sixers kind of selection pool, these are guys we're talking about, like mostly 21-year-olds, mostly guys with a little bit more experience. These are all guys like more ready to bring impacts. And Wendell Moore is a guy that you brought up. He showed tremendous growth each year. His 3-point percentage was leaping like 10% per year to the point where this year it was kind of at a legitimate rate. He's from the Tyrese Maxey high school. He spent 3 years at Duke. He's kind of been overshadowed by a lot of kind of talented players around him. Paolo this year again. Like he's never kind of had that primary role, but he's a guy that I think projects well as a complementary piece in the NBA. I personally, I feel like 23, I feel a little early for him, but when we're looking at like the situation, I would not be mad at walking away with Wendell Moore either. So to jump into a couple more guys, EJ Liddell has been kind of the popular name floating around for a little while. How would you feel about walking away with him at 21 or 23?
I like him, but I feel like he operates in the post a little too much for my liking. But
fair.
I don't know. I feel like he's going to be a great player. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not as high as on him as like a lot of Sixers fans are. I think defensively he's going to be a dog, and he's really, really tough. But his offensive game, it just doesn't seem to blend as well with Embiid and Harden. I know his 3-point shot is nice, but he really loves to operate in the post and post up and things like that. But who knows, man? He's a hustler, and he grabs rebounds, 7.9 rebounds. Please come to the Sixers, 7.9 rebounds. And he seems like a guy who could be switchable because he's really tough and he has basically an NBA ready body. So yeah, I wouldn't be mad at it, but I'm not as high as people are.
Yeah, I feel a similar way to you. He's not my clear cut, this is the guy, this is the exact missing piece, but he certainly brings a lot to the table that Sixers are missing. I started really liking his game as a sophomore at Ohio State. He kind of flirted with going into the draft there and decided to come back, which looking at his stock was probably a good decision. The 2.6 or 2.5 blocks per game jumps off the page for me. That's something that's just ridiculous for a 6'7" guy. And he's a guy that really kind of takes some pride in just blocking shots. He makes great rotations, comes across. That's awesome in a wing. I think he's a great kind of modern power forward, stretch big kind of role. I would like a little bit more size, but the way he competes, the mentality he has, like he does kind of bring it. And like you said, I would have no problem walking away with Liddell at 23. I don't necessarily know if that's my number one pick.
Yeah.
Let's move on to MarJon Beauchamp, who's a very kind of different story. Interesting track record here. A guy who after high school, he was a top 50 ranked recruit. Took a year to prep for the draft where he didn't really play anywhere, then ended up going to a community college and eventually found himself with the G League Ignite. So he's 21 years old, played with the Ignite this season. People are going to get some Matisse Thybulle kind of scares with this guy. He's a defensive kind of master, 7'1" wingspan. But I personally am honestly think highly of him more so than I do of Matisse. What are your thoughts on Beauchamp?
I did not know he went to a community college. That's awesome. But yeah. I think he definitely has more offensive upside than Matisse Thybulle, and I think the shot will eventually come around. And defensively, he's going to be amazing defensively. He's going to be switchable. And also, he's one of the best cutters in the draft, I would say. So I think the Denver Nuggets, someone who are around our pick should be interested in this dude, because if you compare him with Jokic, get some perimeter defense, that would be huge for them. So I think Denver might take him, to be honest. But I would like him. But once again, I don't trust the Sixers in developing him. Plus, he kind of seems like a project, and we kind of need an NBA-ready guy. As much as we don't want to admit it, we kind of need it, to be quite honest, if we don't trade the pick.
Yeah, definitely. And to give a full shout-out to the community college, he went to Yakima Valley College, where he averaged 30.7 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 4.8 assists. So definitely playing above his level there. I liked a lot of what I saw with the G League Ignite team this year with him. Another team that was loaded with talent. When we talk about Dyson Daniel is going to be a pretty top pick. Jaden Hardy's he was mocked to the Sixers twice recently, a guy that's also in the range that we're going to talk about. And just kind of a team loaded with talent that is difficult to stand out on. I thought he did a decent job. And even without kind of a reliable jumper at this point, he still found ways to get his offense. He's a terror in transition as well. And the shot doesn't like look broken. Like he's not a guy that looks afraid to shoot it. It's just not kind of connecting at the highest rate yet. He shot better. He shot better in the past in high school and in community college. It projected much higher. So I do have hope. It's difficult with kind of just such a small sample size that you're looking at these guys. We're looking at everything under such like a tight microscope that I do have hope that it's better than that. And like defensively, the thing that frustrates me about Matisse Thybulle is like the running from behind, the not team-oriented defense, the very like steals and blocks based. I don't feel that way about Beauchamp at all. I think he's a guy that loves like guarding smaller players and like bullying guys, being physical, and that I think like translates in a more team effective way. And I think he could kind of fill that role in a better way for the Sixers. So I personally would be very happy walking away with him. I think you make an excellent point about the Nuggets drafting him as well.
Mm-hmm. Can I say something about Liddell that I just thought of?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should really try to get another rim protector next to Embiid, because then we could allow him to switch more, like in terms of like must stop possessions, because he's really good at like switching on to smaller guards. It's just that we can't do that because if he's not at the rim, then someone's getting blown by and then our rim protection is gone. But if you get another rim protector like Liddell, 2.5 blocks, then Embiid can be more switchable at like, third quarter, fourth quarter in the playoffs, key possessions, and that would be huge for the Sixers.
Yeah, definitely. And his rebounding as well, I think, checks a major box. That's another thing the Sixers have just continually struggled with. And Embiid, I also feel, is not a particularly excellent rebounder, just that he has like the size that he does. But like the supporting cast, like there just has to be a little bit more. And having a guy that's like Liddell's a guy that will go up and get a rebound, which is something that should be absolutely appealing to the Sixers.
Yeah, that's another thing with Matisse. How is Matisse not a good rebounder? That makes no sense to me. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I've talked about kind of with the defense a lot. I think Embiid specifically is a guy Matisse makes look bad super often in terms of like he'll allow his man in front, Embiid will step up, and then it's a bounce pass to Embiid's man for a bucket. And it happens all the time because of Thybulle going for the block and being okay with kind of that boom or bust play. Like I'm more into a guy that's willing to just do the work, team oriented, keep a guy in front of him and just kind of compete. So I don't know. I personally don't think Matisse is going to be back next year. I think there's going to be a way that the Daryl Morey finds to get off it. Do you think that's the case as well?
Yeah. I think he's got to go. But to be fair to Matisse, the Sixers definitely tell him to play that way. And I think a lot of players on the Sixers like play way too aggressively because they have Embiid. And I think Embiid kind of tells them to do that. But like, dude, just stay in front of your man. Sometimes that's better, and sometimes it slows down the possession and the shot clock's running down. Sometimes we just play way too aggressive. They go right by him, and then Embiid's stuck in a situation where a lot of times he deters them from shooting, but other times easy lob, 2 points.
Yeah. No, it happens all the time, and Embiid makes up for a lot of mistakes that the rest of the guys cover, but he certainly can't do them all. And I mean, there definitely needs to be some changes. So we'll see what happens in the full off season. I do want to jump into a couple more guys here. Jaden Hardy is kind of an interesting name that has been kind of projected a higher pick for most of kind of the pre-draft process and seems to be slipping a little bit. Do you have any interest in Hardy coming to the Sixers or no?
He seems to be like NBA level scorer who's going to put up buckets off the bench. I would be interested, but I don't know. I don't think he's the move because he seems not that ready and needs some development. And do I trust the Sixers in that? Most definitely not. He seems like more of a better version of Isaiah Joe, a way better version. So
yeah,
I would be interested. Not as good as of a 3-point shooter, but like in terms of creating, he would be way better, and he could hit step backs and something we haven't seen. Besides from like Maxey in a couple years from the guard position.
Yeah, it's an interesting pick here. It's definitely not like a pick for need. and but the guy just has like such a high ceiling that I think it's almost worth a shot at 21 or at 23 when he's there. Averaged 19.5 points. A guy that like has the feel of such like a premier NBA player. And when looking at like this G League Ignite team, he reminds me a lot of Jalen Green last year. Now, granted, Green shot 6% higher from three, has way more athleticism to his game than Jaden Hardy does, but like they have kind of a similar kind of NBA feel to them and a guy that's ready to step up at the next level. But the shooting splits were just not great. He's a guy that gets tunnel vision often. He's not afraid to jack it. He also has kind of like a Cam Thomas feel to me with the way that he's there to score, and he's a guy that's there to get buckets. He doesn't do a whole lot else, but like the potential's there. So I don't know. I would feel disappointed walking with Hardy in the way that like it's not really what the Sixers need, but he has kind of that. And when looking at the Sixers past drafts, they certainly have the mentality of looking for that value pick, taking the best available player. I wouldn't say either Maxey or Springer was considered like the guy that they had targeted as a missing piece, but because they were the best value, they took him. So if Hardy's there, I could certainly see the Sixers pulling the trigger. To move on to another guy, another kind of draft kind of darling across Twitter and everywhere is Jalen Williams. So the Santa Clara wing, another guy with a freakishly long wingspan, a guy that has all the feel of a very good NBA player. Are you high on him or now?
Yeah, I'm pretty high on him. I think offensively, his game is fantastic. He seems a little slow-footed in my opinion. So that kind of scares me. Like with Doc Rivers, I don't think he would. I think if he got beat a couple times, Doc would be like, "Oh, he can't play. His defense ain't ready," and that scares me a bit. But offensively, oh my, his shot is wonderful. Him in the pick and roll is beautiful. I don't think he's as NBA ready. I think he needs a couple years under his belt. But he's definitely going to be a player, and I think the Miami Heat are looking at him like, yeah, we could develop that dude. And if they get him, he's probably going to develop into a stud. While if the Sixers got him, you know what happens.
Yeah, he's been a guy that's been very much one of the top risers in the draft. Originally kind of pegged as like a early second to mid-second round prospect, a guy that's risen into even the tail end of the lottery conversation. So I think he's a guy that's probably likely off the board before the Sixers pick, but there's a lot to like about him. I mean, my concern would be that like he's 21 years old. It took him 3 years to truly reach kind of this level of impact that we've seen. And also he played a very ball dominant role at Santa Clara, low level of competition compared to a lot of these guys. So he's going to be taking a massive leap when coming to the NBA, but he just has like the frame, the 7'2" wingspan's insane. He has like Kawhi Leonard sized hands. And another guy that can get out in transition, can shoot the ball a little bit. He checks all the boxes that you're looking for. I agree. I don't think he's as advanced in the developmental stages. I think he's perceived to be by a lot of people. I think he's going to take a couple years to fill. And with him being 21, that is kind of concerning. But I don't know. He's not another guy who isn't super at the top of my list, but I would have no issue walking away with there. Another guy that I kind of wanted to move on to. So I got 4 guys left here. I'm going to rank these 4 in your mind for the Sixers and how they would project. So I have Jake LaRavia, Nikola Jovic, Christian Braun, and Dalen Terry.
So number 1, I'm going LaRavia. And then number 2, I'm going Dalen Terry. And then number 3, I'm going Christian Braun. And then number 4, I'm going Jovic.
Okay.
I think
that a lot.
I like that. That's my 4.
I like that. What do you like so much about Jake LaRavia?
I just think he's his body already, he's 6'8". I think he's 6'8", right?
Yeah.
He's built like a tank. He just seems like he has a feel for the game and he knows what to do like off ball. And I think what he did at Wake Forest. Did he go to Wake Forest, right?
Yeah, he did. He went to Indiana State for 2 years, then transferred to Wake Forest for this season.
He just seems like he would have a role as he did in college with the Sixers, and his 3-point shot looks like it's going to project very well, and he's going to do the little things. He's going to hustle. He's a good cutter, and he just seems like an NBA-ready player. His upside isn't as good as like a Jovic or something like that, but he's definitely going to be a quality role player. I think the Warriors are going to take him and develop him into a beast.
Yeah, he's an interesting piece. A guy that took a major leap this year, transferring to Wake Forest, and had the best, just about an ideal season in terms of production. The way he looked, he does a lot of the little things. The 1.7 steals and 1.0 blocks is very appealing to me. He's a high IQ player. He makes a lot of the right reads. The passing potential is also there, which is intriguing to me. The Sixers don't have enough of those guys that just kind of seemingly know what to do with the ball. There's a lot to like there. I will shift it to Dalen Terry, who's a guy I personally am higher on. When we talk about like the dog mentality and how much that's missing, this is a guy who in my mind just straight up like defines it in the way that he like. I was watching a repeat of the game against Washington that Arizona played, which was Terry's one of his best games in the season. And you're literally like 3 minutes into this game and he is clapping in people's faces on defense and doing everything. So the stats don't leave like a ton to be desired when we're talking about 8 points a game, 4.8 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.2 steals. Like you're typically looking for more in terms of production when like looking at a first round pick. But I really do believe in this guy's potential. And I think at the minimum, he's like a culture changing talent. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Originally, like when I first heard him, I like watched his highlights. I was like, nah, this is a bust potential, but I'm coming around to him and I'm starting to love him because he just seems like a hustle guy. And what really makes me excited about him is that passing ability at his size and his handle. That's what separates it for me. And he just seems to have a good feel. And it just seems like he's going to make the most of his opportunity because he plays so hard. So if he gets a chance, Doc Rivers gives him a chance, he's going to be up on his man, hounding him, and then making a great pass. He's going to be a heck of a player one day. I don't think the Sixers would take him, and I would be scared if they did because they would probably mess up his development. But I'm starting to fall in love with Dalen Terry. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, me as well. I mean, when we talk about like the second unit production, like it feels like there's never a guy who just makes his presence felt, and that is Dalen Terry. Like he's a guy not afraid to pick up full court. He will slap the floor, clap in the face, talk shit, do whatever. And also like looking at just like what he does on the court, like he was super responsible for helping run Arizona's offense. And even with guys like Bennedict Mathurin and Christian Koloko, who are both probably going to go off the board before Terry is picked, like he was just as vital to that team. And from a leadership standpoint, from helping run the offense, from calling out sets, he seems like a high IQ guy. The passing potential is there. I believe super and highly from this guy. He spent 2 years in college, took a major jump this year, and I think there's plenty more left to be untapped. So obviously they're looking for somebody a little more NBA ready and a little more like ready to play a role immediately, which I don't think is necessarily the right category to throw him in, but I think there's plenty to like there. To touch on a guy that I would say is probably the most pure NBA ready that I have on this list is Christian Braun, wing from Kansas. A guy that just does all the little things. That I'm personally very much a fan of his game and think he's been underrated through this whole process. What do you think of him overall?
I remember watching him like his freshman year or early on in his Kansas career, and I was like, what is this dude doing on the court? And then I was watching him play, and you could just tell like the coach has a lot of trust in him because he's going to make like the right reads. He's going to make the right play. He's not going to like shock you or anything. He's not like a crazy athletic, wild player on the court, but he does the little things. He kind of gives me some Zach LaVine vibes, not as athletic, but he could jump, and it just seems like he has a little bit of that it factor, like as a role player where he's not afraid of the moment. He hits big shots, and I would not mind him at all. I think it would be a sneaky pick, and maybe we could trade Danny Green and swap with someone's pick, and then like drop back to like number 30 or 33 or whatever, and then draft him and also get a player in that Danny Green trade, and then that would look very nice on Daryl Morey's record.
Yeah, definitely. That would be pretty much my ideal draft would be. I think there's so many. This is what's rare to me about this draft is it's like there's so many guys like more or less what the Sixers need in terms of their role, the stylistic play, and a lot of different kind of flavors in what they do in terms of like each of these guys have a little different pluses and minuses in their category. But whatever you're looking for in like an NBA role player, you pretty much can find in this draft and in the Sixers range, which is to me why I'm against like fully trading out of the pick. Like, I think there's too much talent there to just fully pass off. If we move back a couple picks, add a piece, and still select a player, I'm very in on that move. And Christian Braun's a perfect target with that. He seems to be perceived as a guy like a little like below the rest of the names we talked about, which I don't think is like proper. He took a massive step forward all 3 years in college. I liked him all 3 years as well. 14.1 points. The 3-point percentage is there. And he's a guy, like you said, he's not afraid to step up to the big moment. He hit some big shots for Kansas. He was a vital part of their team, and definitely a guy that I think is like a player coaches trust and will be from the get-go. So I think he's arguably the most NBA ready out of all these prospects. And I can't see a world where he's not like an effective NBA role player. The last guy I want to jump into, Nikola Jovic. So you just made a video on him as well and said you liked his game a decent bit. Give kind of the elevator pitch on what this guy brings to the table.
I mean, he's a 6'10" player that could handle, amazing passer. He can hit step backs. He's going to get mismatches, man, in the half court in transition, and he's going to be able to take advantage of it. And he just has that, Nikola Jokic type quality where he knows the game and he has a great feel. If someone's open, he's going to hit them. It's that plain and simple. So he's just one of those players. I don't know how he will reach his upside, but if he reaches the mountaintop, he's going to be one heck of a player. And I think he's going to go early, probably before the Sixers pick, I would assume. And in a couple of years, he could be something dangerous because of that size and because of his high IQ and passing ability.
Yeah, I personally have him pegged to go to the Spurs with the 20th pick, which I think would be a terrific spot for him. Yeah, I think that'd be a great spot for him. I don't know. He's 18 years old. There's still a ton to be untapped there. I don't think he's a fit for the Sixers. He's pretty low on my list for that because of just like he's not a step in an impact player, and he doesn't necessarily fill the role that the Sixers should be hoping for. You said 6'10", but plays kind of like a guard in a little bit in the way. He's kind of a rich man's Dario Saric is the way I look at him. There's a lot to like about him. I just don't quite think he's the answer for the Sixers. If I had to kind of rank this tier right now, I guess I'm probably putting Liddell, Jalen Williams, Dalen Terry, and Christian Braun as my top, and then every of the other names we mentioned a little bit below that. But I guess kind of the point of this is just how many options the Sixers have in the range they're selecting, which is an awesome thing. So I'm very team keep the pick or find a way to stay in the draft. Do you think that's the case, or are you open to moving it if the price is right as well?
I'm open to anything, but I think the goal should be get a quality player, trade back. I think you call up Orlando, they want picks, and you'd be like, yo, Danny Green, Terrence Ross, we'll give you our 21st pick and we'll get 35 and do our 23rd pick and we get their pick. And I think you can get like a Christian Braun maybe in that. You could get someone. There's a lot of players, like you said. But I remembered what I was going to say before when I forgot. I think one thing that is underrated in terms of like the draft, looking at prospects, is like looking at their role. Like Christian Braun, he wasn't like the number one guy all the time. Wendell Moore was not the number one guy at all. So I think those types of players being able to produce in like a Kansas, in a Duke, in tough conferences like that, I think is very undervalued because they're going to come to the Sixers and they're going to have the same type of role where they're going to have to take a back seat for Maxey, James Harden, Joel Embiid. Well, like a guy like Jalen Williams, he was the guy at Santa Clara. And I know like someone's going to be like, oh yeah, well, he's not going to have to do as much. But like if you played basketball before and you have that role, it's hard to adjust to being just another guy. It's hard to do that. And some players just don't have that. And that's why they ultimately don't, stay in the NBA because they're so used to being the guy all throughout their life because it's the NBA, Every NBA player at some point was the number one guy on their high school, college, whatever it is. So I think having that quality where he could be the number one guy for, every now and again, but being like that fourth or fifth option and still producing and still having an impact, that's super valuable in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a terrific point, and definitely kind of the the sink or swim quality for a lot of guys as they make the NBA leap. And you brought up excellent points there. That's Jalen Williams is kind of the name that jumps in my head when we're talking about this. Is my largest concern for, and especially because of kind of playing at Santa Clara, not as strong a talent. Obviously, he faced off against like the Gonzagas and a couple other teams on the West Coast that were legitimate, but just on a consistent basis, playing teams where he didn't kind of have the same kind of matchup issues. And like obviously being so ball dominant, that's never going to be his role at the NBA level, and being adjusted to that is kind of a question mark for how it will happen. So I think that's a terrific point. It definitely applies, and I don't know. It's interesting to see with a lot of these guys. That is what kind of what swings me more toward the Christian Braun, to the Dalen Terry, to that kind of tier of guys. And the G League Ignite also is a very like odd kind of way to scout them in terms of, because obviously like they're still trying to win games. They're still into this thing, but it's very much like a showcase for these players. And like they have a little bit more free range that like isn't necessarily going to be the case at the NBA level. It's very fascinating to me. So it does make it a little difficult to evaluate all these prospects. And that's what makes it so hard. So Romp, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Let everybody know where they can check out your stuff if they don't know already.
Romp 2.0 on YouTube, and then Sixers Talk with Romp is my Sixers channel. Thank you for having me, and I think Wendell Moore Jr. or Christian Braun. I think after this little session we had, I think those are the moves, man. I'm falling in love with Christian Braun. I don't know why. It wasn't the case before this, but like just thinking about it, I love Christian Braun now.
Yeah, I'm in on that as well. So we will see what happens. We'll get back with you guys next time with some more draft content and everything else you need around the Sixers.